Well, another very warm welcome back, all my loyal YouTube subscribers. And also, if you're a brand new visitor and tuning in to Classic Dirt Bike TV for the very first time, then welcome aboard. Now, next up, we are going to take a quick browse at another pre-1968 vintage racer, which is still being used and winning races even in this modern day. So let's all just take a few minutes to check out Louis Bell's 1964 Cheney Jawa vintage racer. Now, Louis, up until 2015, initially raced a very quick twin-cylinder Tripsa, which of course is the BSA frame with a Triumph twin motor. Although for the following season's championship, Louis wanted something a bit more competitive, but it had to be a pre-unit bike, either a single or a twin. Now, he eventually saw this 1964 Cheney Jawa for sale, and it wasn't long before Louis eventually then bought the bike. Now, the machine was originally built by Simon Cheney, who was of course the son of the legendary chassis builder Eric Cheney, and Simon originally put the bike together for British motocross racer Roger Dunford. Now, I'm sure that you already know that these Cheney frames are among some of the best British manufactured vintage race bike chassis you can buy, and their quality is second to none. Now, with regards the engine, this big single cylinder 4-stroke Jawa motor has a longer stroked crankshaft and a 92mm piston, which makes it up to roughly 600cc. Now, the engine's also fitted with an AMC gearbox and an NEB clutch. Now, the motor's engine oil is housed in the frame and is pumped around the motor by this external oil pump on the end of the crank, although Louis tells me that he has now converted the engine from total loss to a more upgraded storage tank return system. Now, you may notice during this video that some of these clips may appear to be slightly different, as these were filmed at different points in the racing season, but nevertheless they're all essentially still the same bike. Now, the sparks for the engine are supplied by a self-contained interspan ignition system, whereby the power and ignition system are contained in a single unit, which is then recharged before each race event, although Louis's particular Jawa here still appears to have its original magneto fitted in front of the motor. But the MRD reference stamped on the side of the engine casing, I'm assuming, is in reference to the late Pat French, who ran the model replica design company, of course, which initially began by making model airplanes and such, but later went on to produce full-size replicas of the Rickman Matisse bikes, and he also used a variety of engines in his designs, including these big Jawa singles. Now, naturally, because many of these big Jawa singles are Speedway derived engines, their normal fuel would be methanol and not your regular petrol. Now, methanol increases the power, it makes the motor run slightly cooler, and it also helps eliminate pinking or pre-detonation that's sometimes associated with these big bore long stroking singles. But of course, the downside of the methanol fuel is that it can be quite hazardous if it catches fire outside the motor, as it burns with an invisible flame, as a few of my friends have learned to their cost in the past. But nevertheless, treated with respect and consideration in a normal racing environment, methanol is not any more hazardous than regular gas. Now, this rear hub on Louis's Jawa is surprisingly taken from a KTM bike, but it still does the job superbly when it's laced to this alloy wheel. Now, the front forks are a pair of Italian Seriani units, and again these are widely used on these older classics and perform well considering their basic engineering internals. But in comparison to the rear hub, this front hub is an AMC unit, which are very popular choices with these old pre-68 classic race bikes. Now Lewis's rear shocks on his Jawa are Dutch made Riger shocks, which are very good quality, and these will certainly help control the rear end of the big Jawa even on the bumpiest of racetracks. Now these billet made alloy top and bottom yokes are again custom made units by Cheney, although the bike's handlebars and controls are just your stock run of the mill off-road parts. Now, as with many of these other pre-68 classic racers, a substantial alloy handmade fuel tank to hold that precious fuel, and you can see that the tank on Lewis's bike has been through some big changes since he bought the bike, with a few battle scars, but nonetheless this fuel tank does the job superbly to feed this big 500 single motor. Now Lewis did tell me that halfway through his first racing season that the bike's motor's piston broke in half at the gudgeon pin and basically destroyed the full top end of the motor, but since then he's rebuilt the engine with an 89mm piston, which now makes the bike around 560cc, and during the rebuild Lewis also upgraded the top end with long track racing cams. But if you know your Jawa motors, then you'll know how quick and powerful these bikes can be, whether they are in a shale sliding speedway bike or in our case a classic scrambles machine. And in the past few years that Lewis has owned this bike, it's taken him to a multitude of race wins and even a championship win with the Scottish Classic Club. Although when these big 4-stroke Jawa singles are set up and running properly, these bikes are as good as anything on the racetrack in the pre-68 class and capable of winning many races in the hands of a good rider. And so we've talked a little about Lewis's machine and its background, so I think it's now about time we had a look at Lewis on the track with his Jawa Racer. 68 class, and these are the vintage bikes of this class, of course, with some very quick riders on top of these machines. Now we're just waiting to get the all clear from the starting marshal to say it's good to go. Everything looking good. Look out for the bell boys in this particular race. So as they leave the line, it looks like Liston Bell, number 98, who takes the whole shot, with Peter Robinson in second place. Lewis Bell going round the outside. And so as they head up the hill, it looks like it's Liston Bell first, Lewis Bell second, Peter Robinson in third place, who is Liston's younger brother, Lewis, on that very big and very powerful 500 Jawa single. These bikes absolutely well suited the race lead, and it looks like Lewis is now taking the lead from his older brother Liston. This could be a good battle towards the checkered flag as these both slip and slide their way around this Scarfoot Farm racetrack, but it looks like it could be Lewis who is going to hold on to the win in this first pre-1968 class race. Sereni's back up and running. So here is your race leader. It's number 9, Lewis Bell, giving that big Jawa 500 a handful, and looking good for the first win of the day in this pre-1968 class. Now your new second lost Liston Bell in this particular race. There doesn't seem to be any sign of him, with number 9 Lewis out in front on his own here on his big Jawa. So it looks like Liston has had some kind of mechanical problem with that big 500 machine of his. But this is the race leader. It's Lewis Bell, who is slipping and sliding his big 500 Jawa around the Scarfoot racetrack. Number 1, 2 to the checkered flag in this race for Lewis Bell, as he already has a substantial lead on Fergus Moody and Steve Dent in second and third position. But very quick, these big 500 Jawa machines. I'm not sure if this particular bike is running on methanol. Chances are at Motorcycle Club. Now, Lewis Bell was going fine up until just gave the big bike, the big Jawa, too much of a handful and swapped ends. Well, I do hope you enjoyed that very brief look around Lewis Bell's 1964 Cheney Jawa. And if these are the kind of old vintage race bikes you enjoy looking at here on YouTube, then please consider subscribing to my channel to see many more of the same. So thanks once again for taking the time to watch my video content, and I do hope you continue to enjoy more of these old motorcycles when we return once more to Classic Dirt Bike TV.